Where is InsurTech headed next? This is where indie agents own the answer. Welcome to the Vertifor Insurance Podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back to the Vertifor Insurance Podcast. Pumped to have you guys here today because we have a very special guest who is going to step back and give us a high level on the industry, the independent channel, the health of the channel that we all work in and serve every day. It's always important, we do a lot of podcasts and talk about a lot of different unique niche topics, like how to improve specific workflows or different tech stacks that agencies are using. But stepping back and saying, hey, is the industry that we all thrive in today, is it going to be around? For those of you guys who are looking to sell, is 2023 your year? Is this the year that you should be seriously considering passing off your agency and finding a new passing on the torch of your business to someone else. So the expert that we have in-house is the one and only Mark Kreitz from Reagan Consulting. And just a little background on Mark, which I'll let him introduce himself in just a sec. But Mark actually joined Reagan Consulting in 2017, and he joined as a partner of the firm. So if there's a guy to talk to, it's Mark. He is steering the ship in many ways over at Reagan Consulting. He works primarily with clients on mergers and acquisitions. So we're going to deep dive on M&A activity in 2023, agency valuation, and strategic consulting projects. So I'm very excited to welcome Mark. How are you, sir?
Doing great. Thank you, Sid. Great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, let's step back into the history of Mark for a sec. I know you're at Reagan today, and you've done a lot of great work over the last few years, but what led you to choose Reagan Consulting?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I actually grew up in the industry. My dad and my brother operate an independent insurance agent in Dallas, Texas. So I grew up in the industry, went to University of Georgia, and got my risk management degree there, along with banking and finance, and ended up going the finance route after college. Did investment banking for a few years, private equity for a few years, and then found my way to Reagan. Bobby Reagan and his oldest son and I were good college friends, and so that was my introduction. But as you said, been here since 2017 for 6 years, and glad to be here. It's a great industry to be in, and thankful that we're in an industry that we are.
I love that you've got the background on the insurance agency world. You did the work, came from the ground up. That's awesome. So with Reagan Consulting, I know you guys do a lot of different things, but for those who aren't familiar with one of the big efforts or initiatives that you guys work on every year, you put out a study called the Best Practices Study in collaboration with the Big I. First off, how long has this been happening? Because ever since I've been in the industry, not that I'm that old, but we'll pretend for a sec. How long has the study been published?
It was created in 1993 in partnership with the Big I. Okay. And so we have been doing this for 30 years. It's a study we publish annually, and we collect data from over 1,000 agencies every year. Every 3 years we do so, and then once you're nominated as a best practices agent, in every 3-year cycle, you are then publishing your data every year through our data collection file that we do now digitally, which is great. No more Excel files. We are at Reagan trying to digitize our business environment and help make us more efficient. So we are doing that with Enable, a third-party partner, but in partnership with folks like Vertifor and 18 other sponsors help fund this initiative we do every year. And so it's been a great source of information for us to allow us to be a leading consultant for the industry and to help agents and brokers around the country grow and perform.
I know I know this wasn't something we talked about in the discovery call, but I'm just curious, since you landed the 1993 answer out of nowhere, I'll throw this one your way too. How much has the study changed? I mean, I know you've been with the firm since 2017, so maybe if you just want to speak back to that year, but that's a long time to be running. I mean, we're at 93, 03, 13. Yeah, we're decades, 30 decades.
30 years, yeah.
So has the study, it sounds like it's changed in the way that you ingest data and are storing data, and but the data that you're looking at is more what I'm wondering.
Yeah, much more expansive. I think the key metrics have remained the same: organic growth, profitability, how you measure new business, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I know. But all the fundamental characteristics of an agency, the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet, all of those key things, production information, we've been tracking that since the beginning. But I think we have morphed into, there's more compensation metrics by type of employee. There's much more data on production information, specialization by industry, line of business data, account size information. So we have just drilled a little bit deeper every year. And I had that year off the top of my head because this year was the 30th anniversary. And so it was fresh, but I think it's been a great again study for us, just as a beneficiary from getting the data, but also hopefully for the agents and brokers that participate.
Well, I believe that you guys are expanding your data set because it is quite a long study. When I've looked at it, you're not sitting down for your Sunday cup of joe for 15 minutes going through the best practices study. You've got to carve out, an evening or a couple hours to really sift through the insights that you guys provide. For those who haven't read this study, what would you say are the key highlights, the impact insights, and specifically as it relates to the health of the indie channel, right? I mean, what are you seeing at that high level as far as challenges that the industry is running into and just, things that agencies should be aware of as they're looking at the longevity of their business and thinking about it being multi-generational?
Yeah, it's been probably the best 2-year run in the industry's history in the last 2 years, in 21 and 22.
That's crazy.
Profitability is at all-time highs. Organic growth is at all-time highs. We've had records in both 21 and 22. And really part of that profitability increase is really as a result of COVID. COVID helped, probably kick us where we needed to get kicked in terms of managing certain expenses that may have gotten out of hand, or just the business changed, the model changed from how you sell and how clients consume sales, just almost changed overnight, it seemed, in 2020. And so the overall expense structure is starting to morph a bit and become more remote. And so obviously expenses as a result of a more remote work environment changes and helps generally profitability. At the same time, all that's happening and profitability is rising, all things being equal. Organic growth, the kind of lifeblood of an independent insurance agency, has been hitting all-time records the last couple of years. And a lot of that really, from our perspective, it's kind of a perfect moment where we are in a hard market and have been. This is the 5th year in 23 that we are in a hard market in terms of property and casualty rates rising. I saw a release this morning, I think from CIAB, that Q4 of 22 had still positive rate exposure growth, but it was the lowest it had been in a number of years. And so is that hard market stopping anytime soon? We'll see. Inflation can impact that as well, but it's been fascinating as profit has risen. Growth has also risen, leading to these crazy growth and profitability numbers for our clients and agents and brokers around the country. And so in terms of health, you couldn't have asked for for better metrics that we track in the best practices study. And so we think today we're as healthy as we ever are, but as you peel back the numbers, it's important to note that we are still in a hard market, that the new business potential and opportunity still exists out there. And that's really what we see as the differentiator for those that are even growing faster than the norm, the ability to write new business.
So if we could just dig into some of those numbers for a sec, because at face value, I love to hear that we've got almost 10% organic growth. It does worry me to hear, though, that it's because of primarily because of the hard market, as opposed to adding value and additional value in some way. Because what I see the effect being is, and I'd be curious how you guys calculate that organic growth percentage. If I think about my dad, he's got an agency in Florida. He's in the construction market and nonprofit space. If he does a lot of paper contractors, and if his guys are seeing this, rise in premiums at some point over a 5-year period, they're going to look at him and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they're gonna turn their heads and start looking and shopping, right? So how, I guess, are you seeing that there's still a really high retention rate, and so consumers are just saying, "Well, I trust my agent, and I guess that's it. It is what it is at this point, and I'll stay put." Are you seeing that people are, shopping, and so the growth is over the channel, but not necessarily with a, specific agency, right? There's still growth across the channel, but that doesn't mean that your agency is safe, because you've got to navigate these difficult conversations with, these small businesses that are questioning why their premiums are going up. Again, I love to see that number. I worry about it at the same time.
Yeah, we do too. It's been very positive the last few years. And, I think when we boil down what makes organic growth, the 9.2%, that best practices firm average in 2022, what were the drivers behind that? And, I don't know if we could quantify for you, Sid, 7% of that was rate. We don't know, because it's going to be different for every firm and every industry and every geographic area. But we do think there are 4 factors for organic growth. One being, overall exposure for the risk at hand, the rate environment, which is what we're talking about right now, account retention, to your point, and the new business. 2 of those are totally out of your control as an independent agent. Exposure base and rate environment. If you're in a coastal area and you do a lot of property insurance, chances are your rates were through the roof or uninsurable in some cases. Same thing with cyber and D&O premiums. You've seen certain lines of business and geographic areas be more exposed or just be hit harder in those situations. But account retention and new business, that's totally up to the agent. And that's where we want our clients, the independent insurance agency channel, to really focus their time and attention, because you can't do anything about the rate environment. It's interesting. We've had this incredible run. If you go back to the Great Recession in 08 and 09, on average, the general average insurance agency in the country shrunk by less than 2%. Now, we weren't in a really hard market at that point, but when most of the country fell off a cliff, 30, 40%, our industry was pretty resilient. It wasn't a soft market. I don't think it was a really hard market, but at the same time, that's pretty good. Mm-hmm. And so even in these tough times, and so we may be entering a recessionary time in 23, maybe 24, who knows what the Fed continues to do with interest rates. But if we do enter a time where the economic pullback is real, people feel that in terms of their clients, and account retention, proves to be tricky because rates are still where they are. That's the test of a true insurance producer is, can you retain the business even in the midst of tough renewals, and can you go out and write new business? What is differentiating your firm? We can talk about the metrics, but I'll pause there.
No, that's wonderful. And actually, you brought up producers. and, their ability to sort of to keep the relationship, right, and sustain that relationship through tough times. One of the interesting data points that came out of the best practices study was this statistic around producer recruitment and development. And the study notes that for producer recruitment and development, it actually proves challenging. The reason being that net unvalidated producer payroll, which is called NUP, a measure of producer recruitment and development, remained at 1.1% of net revenues compared to 1.2% in last year's study. So we're going down a bit. Bigger issue, though, is that a healthy NUP investment would be 1.5% to 2%. So even last year, we weren't hitting what we might consider healthy baseline metrics, and we've actually gone backwards from last year. So the study concludes that agencies should consider redirecting a portion of today's record profits from toward new producer investments. That was an interesting highlight that we're not, and I wonder why that is, right? Why aren't agencies seeing the need to invest in producers? I'm wondering if they're like diverting that money towards technology and thinking that they'll run their sales teams more efficiently with less people, or if they're really, if it's a hiring issue. Have you seen any indicators as far as, why this problem not only continues to exist, but seems to be getting worse?
Yeah, you just hit on, Sid, I think the biggest issue our industry has dealt with for as long as I've kind of been in it. And I think, others here at Reagan would say the same thing, that hiring effective sales talent is likely the hardest thing that an agency has to do every year in order to grow their organization. And some are more effective than others, but I think it'll still continue to be the biggest issue that our industry faces for the next 10 years, just because having that effective sales organization and the talent within your four walls is, the lifeblood of how you grow the business. And having a new business producer skill set is likely one of the most rare skill sets in the industry, and why they're compensated highly, why they're so sought after. But I think last year in particular, the labor market impacted this greatly. I think, when we hear stories from our clients in central U.S. and, call it, Kansas or Nebraska, getting their team poached from a large broker in New York for twice the amount of money that they're making currently, and our independent insurance agency client you can't match that, just because it's not good fiscal practice, et cetera. That is what we saw a lot of last year, and not that, not poaching, but just this remote environment has basically broke down geographic barriers and allowed people that have more resources, larger brokers, to invest more in talent around the country that may not be geographically concentrated to where their office is. And so I think the labor market had a huge deal. The competitive ness around finding those producers that's everybody's competing against everybody. And so what differentiates your firm to allow you to invest more of your available cash and revenue in producers? You're right, 1.5% to 2% is what we view as a healthy mark, which is not a small amount, but to kind of redefine the metric you cited, NUP, the net investment in unvalidated producers, it's really the cost that you're carrying over and above what you would pay an individual producer at your normal commission splits. Mm-hmm. And so if they're making $20,000 as a normal producer, but you're paying them $50,000, the net of $30,000 would be the ultimate NUP, and then you divide that by revenue to kind of standardize it amongst different revenue sizes, so you can track yourself versus others. But yeah, the hope is to have that up 1.5%, 2%, because when we see people invest in producers successfally, because you can throw a lot, you can swing a lot, you can hire a bunch of people, but if only 10% work out, you got to obviously adjust your plan of attack. But for those that are doing it on average 50%, batting 500, and investing 1.5%, 2%, on average, they're growing much faster than their peers.
Interesting. All right, let's dive into your niche here with M&A activity.
Right.
So what, just from a high level here, for those who aren't maybe as familiar with how the movements of the M&A space can affect the market, how does that work, right? Just a conceptual explanation here of, okay, we have mergers and acquisitions happening, we have agencies buying and selling each other. How does that help or hurt the market?
I think it can do both.
Mm-hmm.
Really depends on where you're positioned. I was having lunch with a client today, and we asked him this question: is when you have retail brokers or wholesale brokers down the street that you do business with or you compete against get acquired by a larger firm, do you view that as an opportunity, or do you view that as a threat because the resources and tools that a larger broker can provide this broker kind of put you guys at a disadvantage? And the answer from this individual in particular was, we love it. And we're remaining independent, but we know that when that happens, we have an opportunity because in many cases, and not all cases, but in many cases, when that acquisition happens, the broker that is acquired may not keep their eye on the ball in terms of the clients and focus on different things. Could be bigger accounts now that they're part of a bigger organization, whatever it may be, leaving smaller accounts or other opportunities to brokers that remain independent. That is not always true. The flip side is also true, where the resources and tools can allow brokers that are acquired to get in the door of bigger accounts, sell upstream, get access to new markets. So I think the answer to that question is totally dependent on where you are, how you're competing, what accounts you're going after. And so it can be very good for those that are a part of it. But if those that are remaining independent and want to keep independent, if you position yourselves accordingly to where you have a niche or you have specific sales folks that are focused on a geographic area where there's been a lot of consolidation, and you can attack that market because people have forgot about it or not focused on it, a lot of opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the individual decision that an agency makes, that makes 100% sense. It can go either way. I think there's an argument for both decisions. Where I hear agencies being fearful is, and those that are more in the camp of, I want to be independent. I started this business by my own bootstraps. I had to count the number of pens that I had and measure the ink that was in each one of them. And now look at where I am today. For those guys, what they feel is this, pressure to sell and a concern around, is this market going to be an environment where an independent business really can succeed when they have, inter-channel competition with the big guys? If we can all kind of stay small to medium size, then at least we're on somewhat of an equal playing field. But as soon as, you guys start getting together and buying each other up, how do I win in that environment? How do I continue to be competitive? So it's interesting, and I don't know that there's like a perfect answer to that question. But I'll tell you, as long as I've been in the industry and paying attention, M&A activity has been up, right? I mean, it's always been something that, mergers and acquisition. And I remember getting into the industry, I've unfortunately always been in the industry. Thanks, Dad. But at least paying attention and, always remember thinking, oh, wow, there's so much M&A activity that, there won't be an environment for the independent guy. That was 10 years ago, and we're still around. So is this a ghost fear? Is there bearing to it? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a rational fear for sure. And, the two of us have fathers in the industry that have been doing this a long time and have kind of weathered some, certain storms with respect to how our market has changed. But It's interesting. We did a presentation about this topic at our recent Big I function for the 30th anniversary of the study, and there were like six things that we thought were kind of the differentiators of how you compete against scale in today's market. But back to my earlier point, it all depends. But the six things that we kind of drew, and we talked about a couple of them, but I think at its core, number one is our business is still fundamentally a relationship business. And so if you control the relationship and you treat your clients well and your stakeholders well, and there's nothing that you can do otherwise to enhance that relationship still wins many times over. There are some cases where as you get bigger and the clients get bigger, that changes or morphs into a more of a technology play. Hey, what resources do you have? But relationship is still the key backbone of our industry that I think will still continue to win. The second is specialize. Are there industry verticals, lines of business that you do well and you should do more of, because that's the lifeblood and the best part of what your agency does and how you could compete with a larger firm, making sure you're not being all things to all people, but really focusing on what you're really good at. Easier said than done, but specialization can provide growth opportunities, but also your ability to compete. We've seen the larger brokers use teams to team sell. Team selling has become much more rampant and more of a commonplace in our industry of how producer teams attack client opportunities and new business opportunities when you're competing against other brokers. And so teams can be super helpful. Teaming up with somebody down the street that's independent that you can go together internally, how you team up, and go team sell. That has really had a great impact on a lot of our clients. The third is leverage best practices. You need to be watching your metrics. You need to be watching how you're competing against your peers, how you're doing, how you're tracking on growth, new business opportunities, et cetera, your profitability. The fifth would be this exploration of networks and clusters that exist out there today. There are many options that can provide additional financial returns to you through, not to name names, but they can provide additional market relationships, more contingent profit sharing income, and provide additional tools and resources that you may not otherwise have access to. That can help you compete. And lastly, it's just, we've dabbled in this a little bit, is just watching technology, making sure that you are, abreast of what's happening. That doesn't mean you have to go full freight into investing in a technology firm. That's not what we're saying, but to watch what's out there that can make your business more efficient and more able to compete against those that have the capital to invest in stuff like that. So that was a long answer, Sid, I know, but it was fresh, and so I thought I'd mention those things that we talked about recently.
I love that answer, and I, if I was to add my own opinion to the sixth one, I would say the technology can really help in that area to drive efficiency. I've walked into agencies thinking that they were going to be bigger, meaning have more people, than they actually are. And it's because of how they're using technology, streamlining workflows, cutting out friction, cutting out unnecessary steps, manual entry, whatever that may be. And at the same time, improving the customer experience, which helps retention and keeps customers happy. So there's a lot packed into each one of those, which I would honestly love to do a whole podcast on now that you've said them. But I want to dig into this question of, should you sell your agency in 2023? Yeah. So what, for those agencies out there listening, what are the factors that they should consider when, juggling this question of, do I sell in 2023? And I know there's a lot of different ways to go about selling your agency. You can sell into a larger agency. You can pass it on to somebody within the agency. You can go, to a PE firm. I guess I'd be curious on not that you would want to ever recommend, an agency make a specific decision, but where are you seeing the most opportunity, and just what are those factors that they should consider when making that decision?
Yeah, and I think I may tackle your question about like what's happening right now. What is happening in 2023 from a market standpoint? Because it seems like a lot has changed in the last 9 months from our perspective as we live and breathe this every day. The interest rate environment has fundamentally changed in 9 months. And so that does have impact on people that are actively buying, because most of these acquisitions that are being done utilize debt in some capacity. And generally, the majority of the deals that are done use all debt. All of 100% purchases of agencies across the country. Generally, the buyers that are making those investments are doing so with all debt, some equity, some could be mergers, but debt is the primary instrument in order to facilitate that transaction. And so, in the last decade, we have seen this just incredible run of M&A activity to points where we never thought it would ever get to. But for example, there was almost 1,000 deals announced in 2021 publicly around the country in our industry.
Wow.
Last year, that number dipped into the 600s in 2022. Now, part of that is, 20 and 21 had some tax potential changes on the horizon when the seat in Washington changed. And then 21, everyone thought, okay, then here's when capital gains are going to change. And so people rushed a little bit in 20 and 21 really to accelerate their deal if they were going to make it happen. If the capital gains tax ultimately changed on 1/1 of 2022, they wanted to make sure they got it done before that. And so you saw some acceleration of that as well, but also you just had this like incredible supply of active buyers or demand from active buyers in the industry. And some of these active buyers started their businesses, less than 5 years ago. Some of these are newly created entities from industry executives from a prior life, now joining forces with a private equity-backed firm to provide financing and go out and assemble a national or regional organization that can be, a perpetuation fix for those that are looking for that option. So that's kind of, what we've seen is just this incredible run. And yes, the low interest rate environment with easy access to financing, the stock market generally doing well since the Great Recession, all those things measured up and allowed this M&A run to happen. But in the last 9 months, you've seen interest rates, almost quadruple. You had something happen last week with Silicon Valley Bank, and we'll see what happens after that. But you have this just great economic uncertainty right now of what's happening. Plus, a big part of the M&A market is how the public brokers are doing. Like, how are they valued? Because if you're a private equity-backed broker, you use those as a measuring stick of how you would value yourselves. And so this is Gallagher and Marsh and Aon and Willis and Brown & Brown and Baldwin Risk Partners, Goosehead, Ryan Specialty. All of these firms are tracked very closely by us and by others in the industry, and in particular private equity-backed brokers that are being active in the space. Private equity has been the most active buyer by a long shot, probably in the last 10 years. They now do on average about 70% of the total deals in any given year. With this change, and back to public brokers for a second, those values came down last year as the stock market came down, and so those values came down slightly. They rebound at the end of the year as the stock market did a little bit better. Private equity has to keep an eye on that. Plus, their interest rate market has totally changed, and so their cost of doing deals has gone up dramatically. The funny thing is, the first few months of this year, for quality firms that we take to market at Reagan, we've seen the values go up. Values have gone up in the last 6 months for quality firms, even in the midst of all this economic uncertainty. The public broker values coming down slightly, interest rates changing. And so, we're sitting around, we're asking ourselves the question, is like, if you're still in the market, the buyer landscape is kind of bifurcated into this private equity buyer landscape is bifurcated into those that have cash and can still deploy it, and those that don't, because they, their debt costs and financing costs have risen to a level they just can't sustain that level of M&A activity they used to. And so now we're in this position where the buyer universe looks a little bit different, but the demand is still there for quality agencies that we partner with. And if it's still there and they want to get into a certain market, into a certain line of business, 2023 still could be a great, an active year. We may not see the craziness of 20 and 21 because of the taxes and everything else that was happening, and because a few buyers are on the sidelines right now. But really, we're looking at a year that could be kind of almost as active as last year. And the values for a lot of reasons are still rising for quality agencies, which is still amazing to us, but it's a vote of confidence again that our industry is still super, super healthy and investors want to be a part of it.
That's fascinating. So if I was to, let's put it this way, I'm a rookie when it comes to this stuff, so I'm going to regurgitate what you just said so I know I understand. It sounds to me like if you're a buyer, it's just become more expensive to purchase an agency. But that doesn't mean that because it's more expensive, that there's less purchases happening, or that people don't want to. It's just there's less buyers in the market able to make these purchases, and so
I think that's. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Sid.
No, go ahead.
What I would add on to that is, I think the buyers that are staying in the market have basically said, we are okay with a lower return on our investment for a period of time while the interest rate environment is where it is, because we want to stay committed to our M&A growth strategy, which is still a key strategy for a lot of firms, public brokers, private equity-backed brokers, private brokers are active. So it's still an active strategy for some, not for all, like we had in the last couple of years. And so activity is down. Values, though, have held and in some cases risen for those that are really of quality. And we can talk about what makes your firm quality, but I think it's a fascinating time for sure.
It is. Well, it sounds to me like those players who are in the game to make a quick buck through a purchase, they've been weeded out, essentially. And you're really looking at buyers who understand the complexity and have a mature strategy through M&A, which honestly is good if you're selling an agency to them. Although it means you got to have your stuff in order, because there's no fudging anything anymore. You need to make sure that you go into that negotiation knowing what you want, and knowing what's realistic, I should say, and how to have that conversation. But those all sound like hopeful, insights, I guess. So I get to bleed into the internal factors here. What does make a good agency to, what should those agencies who are looking to sell, what are they looking at internally to say, am I a good purchase for these mature investors?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think what I would say is, regardless of what what you want to do with your firm, if you want to, if you think selling is the only option because you have no perpetuation plan, or because, competitively you're not in a good place, whatever it may be, if you want to remain independent or sell your firm, making your firm more attractive and a better performing firm are the same thing. We think even if the point is to remain independent or to sell, we think doing these things make your firm more valuable in either situation and more healthy. And so as I was thinking about this, Sid, the biggest asset to a firm that is looking to acquire somebody is really, does this target have a demonstrated track record of consistent and maybe over market organic growth? Growth has been the biggest question in buyers' minds. Is this a firm, especially in today's hard market? It's like it's been a little easier to grow if you can solve the retention piece. It's been, all things being equal, easier to grow in the last few years than it has otherwise, because just exposure and rates have gone up. And so even without that, can you be a consistent grower going forward after an acquisition is over? But if you've demonstrated that track record, that is checkbox number one. That's what people want to see. If you're not a grower, people get concerned immediately. It's like, well, what's been going on? What have you not been a part of this market? And so that's number one. The second is, I think we talked about earlier, is how are you different? Like, are you different? What is your competitive advantage? Is it because you are an expert in manufacturing in Texas and you just do it better than anybody else, or you're a stop loss self-insurance benefits expert and you do that really, really well? So is it a line of business or a particular industry where you specialize and you can compete against the larger firms because of your expertise? So are you specialized and have a growth track record in that specialty? Could be a line of business, could be industry, et cetera. There are a lot of acquirers that are just looking to be in a certain geography. Could be pick a big city, or there are independents everywhere. And if you're in a big city, or if you're in a desirable location for a specific buyer, it could be a second tier city or even a small city. But if it's somewhere that fills a gap that a buyer desperately needs, that could be a differentiator in its own. And so geography and the ultimate economic surroundings of what's happening there is important. And then maybe the last thing I'd say is, we talked about NUP, the investment in young producers. What is the age of your team, the health of your organization, and really, are you investing? Are those investments panning out? Is that NUP at a level it should be? But another metric we did not talk about earlier, which I meant to talk about, is something called sales velocity. And so, as you're thinking about like metrics as the independent agent, organic growth, sales velocity would be number two. And sales velocity is a factor that contributes to organic growth because it's about new business. But I'll just talk about it just quickly. Sales velocity is a measure of your new business based on what you've done historically. So if you're a $10 million agency firm, $10 million in commission revenue, and you write in new business the next year $1.5 million. 1.5 divided by 10, 15% sales velocity. You can write business through BOR, AOR, just new business that you guys write. But a 15% sales velocity would probably put you in the upper echelon of firms and brokers out there. The ability to write new business, and in particular, who is writing that new business within your organization? Is it the freshmen, the guys that are 35 to 45? Is it the sophomores, 45 to 55? Is it the juniors, or is it the seniors? And so, as the more sophomore, freshman, and junior talent you have, the more healthy your sales organization is. And that's the age banding of sales velocity you can find in your report. So those were a few things that I would say buyers are super eager to see, but also that would be healthy for any organization trying to grow.
Yeah. So just as a quick pitch, because we can't not, do you guys help agencies with those few internal factors? I mean, I know you can't go out and control the market, right? You can only create visibility and transparency, but for those interested in taking things to the next level internally, can you help?
We can, yeah, and we do valuation work, we do consulting work, we do planning sessions. We obviously are active in the M&A market, but our goal is to accomplish an agency's goal, whatever that goal may be. Could be many things. Could be restructuring their shareholders agreement to allow for new equity programs that they can recruit new producers in, anything like that to help an agency grow. If that's their goal, that is our goal as well.
Wonderful. Well, I'm hearing a resounding, should you sell your agency in 2023? Yes, if you're ready, is how
That's
I
right.
would sum it
That's
up.
right.
Wonderful. All right, we'll close out with just one last, this came up in the last few days, and I'm just curious to talk to you about it. Silicon Valley Bank, what do you think? Is this a like one-off isolated incident that just happened with this particular bank, or is this an indicator that maybe there's a ripple effect here with with buyer health? And I guess I see it. I know people are looking at 2007, 2008 and saying, my gosh, what does this mean for the economy? I guess I look at it more as this particular bank was funding technology companies. And so is there any sort of trend with, loaning and funding and affecting, this sort of having a ripple effect and affecting the buyer health that we just talked about in 2024 or later 2023.
Yeah, let me caveat what I'm about to say with I am not a bank expert. I'm not a Silicon Valley expert or a tech expert by any means, but we obviously get asked the question too by our clients, what would this mean for me? And we've talked to regional banking firms that have insurance arms in the industry, and they're dealing with their issues as well. That, has this created a bank run on all regional banks? No, but it has impacted them in different ways, and so different regulations to come. It'll be interesting. I do think, Sid, there'll be some type of ripple effect. While it was probably a unique event, there's kind of a fundamental question around: is the banking system still healthy? And I think they are. It's just a matter of I think for SVB it was a perfect storm. It was the clients that they had, and that was just the nature of where they are and what they were, who they were doing business with, and then this once in a couple decades increase in interest rates when they bought bonds at a certain level and had to sell them at another level. It was incredibly dilutive for them, and that was unfortunate timing. But I don't think it's a systemic issue for our clients, your clients, the independent insurance agency channel. If anything, investors in my mind would kind of think about, okay, what asset class do I want to be in with turmoil, potential uncertainty with economic recessions, upcoming potentially. Insurance kind of continues, insurance brokerage in particular, continues to just demonstrate very strong fundamentals. And so, if we could invest, we would gladly invest. We can't, but we would gladly continue to invest in the insurance space. But that would be my 2 cents. So hopefully no impact, but it'll have some ripple effect, I think, at some point.
Yeah, I didn't think about the ripple effect being pushing investors to a different market, and insurance being another, sort of the next big thing. It's an interesting theory, which you'll have to come back on the podcast later this year or next year to see if your bet holds. So, Mark, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge, giving us a high level. Safe to say that there's a lot of confidence in the independent channel, and we look forward to just, for those of you guys out there, keep going. Keep crushing it, be intentional, but, we wish you the best. And Mark, we'll look forward to having you on the podcast again.
Great. Thank you, Sid.
If you haven't yet been to Austin, Texas, between May 7th to the 10th, consider this your official invitation. Accelerate is the largest gathering of Vertafore users from around the country. And no matter if you're looking to be challenged by hearing the stories of successful owners who did things a bit differently, see cutting-edge solutions thanks to the implosion of the InsurTech ecosystem, or learn how you can maximize your current Vertafore tech stack, Accelerate has it all. So go to accelerate.netview.org, put it in your phone, put it in your computer, wherever you are, accelerate.netview.org, grab your ticket, and join us in the live music capital.